Okay, so it turns out I have several good the next lesson videos for this, but most people, we go over it during the lesson. That said, I need a definitive, hey, these 7 fingerings exist lesson. So I'm going to go ahead, Dan, and use you as this will be a very useful video in the future. I almost sent you a base version of the same thing, which totally would have worked, but here we are. So what we're doing, first and foremost, I want you to just stop and learn those 6 note names that we discussed. Not intellectualizing the concept, just B and E, C and F. Make that part 1. Give yourself a random geography test on that until you start getting 100 on it every time. And then add the 10th fret, D and G, and then give yourself a geography test on the whole thing until you start getting 100 every time. The key step is where you don't think about them in order, but just randomly think about, if you need to, make 6 pieces of little paper, write B, E, C, F, D, G on them, shuffle them up, turn them over, point to that dot, turn it over, point to that dot. So these are our landmarks, as when we're navigating, in general, we're going to be working off of root notes on the 2 bass strings for a while, certainly when we play rhythm guitar. So please stop and completely do that really quick, comfortable few minutes. Great, so what we're going about doing here is laying the framework for all of the diatonic, meaning major scales and modes, playing that we're going to be doing by learning the 7 fingerings that we're going to be playing in every single key, but learning them in C major first and foremost. Why C? It's all naturals. We have to pick some key. Great, so what do we have on the page? We've got this thing, says this fingering's called 1, Roman numeral number 1, and that's just so we can refer to fingering number 1. And it says in parentheses, 2nd fret. What I mean by that is your index finger at the 2nd fret, and 4 fingers over 4 frets, assuming that you're going to use those fingers for those frets. You're going to use the pinky for the 5th fret, and again, any other thoughts that are coming into your head right now, we just mean right now going across a positional scale pattern where we're just doing 4-finger standard playing. There are a million other things we do. This just happens to be what we're doing right now. So, we see 2nd fret. That means bing, bang, bang, bang. Also, getting yourself into this position where all 4 fingers are on the bass string, including your pinky not feeling like a reach, is a great way to get your thumb into classical position, and that's where we need to be to do this stuff, not palm against the instrument where it all feels kind of out of sorts, especially if one has smaller hands. So before you get started, here's C in this pattern that we're playing, right? This is C and this is C. So we are going to be playing every single note as though, right now it's going to be like bunch of notes now, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, extra notes up here. So that's pattern 1 on the bass string. Our entire system starts with a reach note. So as opposed to drifting back there, we need to literally reach to where your middle finger still feels anchored to the 3rd fret and go 1st fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret. Once you're done with that first note, you don't have to reach anymore. So that's the 6th string. F, G, and A, but we're not thinking about note names. We're just thinking about a physical hand movement. The next 2 strings go 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret. And there's the state capital, C. We are indeed playing the C major scale. We're playing everything available to us here in C major. So let's just start with those 3 strings as part 1. Go ahead and memorize that, and don't look at the page. I don't mean magically conjure the info. I mean that we're used to subconsciously watching learned musicians look at the page while they do stuff. They're reading music. We're learning a hand movement that, just like when you learned pentatonic boxes, it's going to be something that you apply at different frets and when in different keys. And when you're doing that, you're not going to be thinking about numerals or note names. You're just going to be thinking about there exists this hand movement. So the 3 bass strings. And you can notice when you get to the root sonically, RLE too. So we're like a bunch of notes now. And then on the 2nd string, we're just going to have 2 notes. And it's going to be middle finger followed by pinky finger. And then on our high E, we're always going to be playing the same fingering that we played on the low string. So there's fingering number 1. And totally eliminate rhythm when you're going over this. The things I wrote on the back of the page, so just pause and learn fingering 1. You've memorized it. Don't look at the page, it's just a hand movement. Really focus on the technique part of it. Though there's really only 2 cumbersome notes, it's just that very first one. It's the F here and the F there. Everything else is comfortably under our fingers. Great, so now what you want to do is associate playing fingering 1 with pointing there, pointing to C on this string. Larger picture, if I picked some random fret and played this pattern that we just learned, it would turn out I was playing in this key, in this case E. There I'm just poking at the bigger picture, but if that didn't make sense, it doesn't matter. Fingering 1, learn it and associate it with pointing to your middle finger on the 5th string. If any of this was too fast, scooch back. What did I just say? Middle finger on the, you're going, I'm playing this thing. It's called fingering number 1. It's a hand movement, and it makes me think about pointing here. Also, while we're at it, if you start on C in any of our fingerings, it's going to come out of the instrument. Cool. So fingering 2 is also an index reach fingering. We've got the 4th fret in parentheses up there, so that means 4, 5, 6, 7. That should set off a bunch of alarms because that's A flat, not a natural. So this is going to be another reach back with your index finger fingering. The index reach ones are the more loopy, uncomfortable ones. It just happens we're starting with 2 of those. Let's notice that our very first fingering started with F. This next one's going to start with G. That pattern's going to hold true. We're going to have one that starts on every note in the scale. So anyway, we're at the 4th fret, and then we see a circled 3. All 3 of the, and here's C while we're at it, under our index finger in reach position. This C, we're not getting to in this fingering. So yeah, all 3 of the bass strings go 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, right on the dots. That's the very first hand movement that we played in the entire system. So that's how we could describe fingering number 2, is that you do that 3 times. And there's where our state capital is. And then the top part of fingering 2 is the single weirdest thing we're going to do in all 7 of these fingerings. We get a comfortable thing, then a weird thing, and then the same thing we played. Sure, a lot of the time when you get to this point in your life, you're going to advance up into the next fingering, but we're also going to know how to do it right here, staying positional. So there we are. We have, I'm playing in rhythm because I already know how to do this. When you're doing it, just make it a grocery list. Don't come back down the patterns at this point until you've already memorized them. I'm not suggesting don't come back down scales. I'm just suggesting that the order of operations is 1, memorize it, totally disregarding rhythm, going down, down, consciously focused, and then when you've memorized it, then start coming back up the pattern. That's just the optimal way to actually get the information into your head. Then when you start coming back up the pattern, it's going to feel like a formality as opposed to something you have to focus on. So that was fingering 2. We know 1, which was at the 2nd fret, and the root was here, and 2, which was at the 4th fret to the 7th fret, and here's where that was. Great. So we get to fingering number 3. You might make a note on your page that this is at 9 minutes. And it says 5th fret. So now we're no longer going to be doing this index reach stuff. This is going to be way more of a comfortable guitar-y fingering. So back here it was a bunch of notes then C, and we were just like some notes then C. This next one's just A, B, C. That's where we are in the grand scheme of things. So there's where C is in this pattern. And again, we're not looking for every C everywhere, just on the bass strings. So the 2 bass strings go 5, 7, 8. The next string goes 5, 7, 9. So there's our first pinky reach. And the reason we're doing that is because this entire fingering's in a very comfortable, right under my fingers spot versus the index reach ones, which are not. So we're going comfortable, comfortable, yuck, comfortable, comfortable, comfortable. And the top part is really easy and nice. Let's notice at this point that there's been 3 notes per string, except that there's 1 string per pattern where we just hit 2 notes. There are some good major scale exercises where you hit 3 notes per string. In this particular instance, we're just going for 1 instance of each note. If I were to go, you know, that would have 2 E's. So we're just going for one of each note. And when you go to that pinky reach, you want to literally reach for it, not drift to it. Not let it derail your entire process. So it's like comfortable, 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 yuck, comfortable, comfortable, comfortable. So don't let the one weird fingering. So yes, now we have dealt with the fingering like this in 2 different ways. We did it with our back here. We were trying to, in fingering 1, we went index, middle, pinky, because that fed into what we did next. Now we're doing the one we were staying away from, index, ring, pinky, because it keeps us centered here to comfortably play like guitarists, as opposed to going and then trying to figure out, so there we go. So it goes, 5th fret, comfortable, there's do, comfortable, comfortable, yuck, comfortable, 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 comfortable. Great. Fingering 4 is the one you probably already know if you know any major scales. This. And there's the root. So hey, we had one that started on F, where it was like a bunch of notes, now C. One that started on G, where it was like 3 notes, now C. Fingering 3 was like a couple notes, C. So now we've arrived at a point where there's just B, C. So I wrote that B in there, and it is a scale tone. You're going to mostly use it in transition or to move into C. So the difference between playing every single note in the fingering and starting on the root, back here it was a big difference. Now it's just whether you put the first note in or not. If that didn't make sense, just learn the fingering. It goes 2 of these, 2 of these, then the rest, and there's your state capital. And, if you already know, like, the G major scale or something, you already know how to play this fingering. It's that one. So moving this fingering around is moving the other fingerings around is the same exact concept. You're just, next time what we're going to be doing is realizing, well, wow, I can play everything everywhere. So this is our 3rd type of fingering, no reaches. We had index reaches, pinky reaches, now it's just no reaches. And again, the reaches are the circled notes on your page. So stop. And I'd also like you right now to just really just revisit the notion that the way we're trying to do this is you totally master the first fingering. You totally master the 2nd fingering. Then before you move on to the 3rd fingering, you make fingerings 1 and 2 big part 1. So we're finishing as we go. Then you learn the 3rd fingering, and then you go 1, 2, 3. So we're backtracking and finishing as we go. The complete opposite of play through all 7 fingerings and hope to improve. Anyway, by now you should see where this is going. The next one, number 5, is literally going to start with C. We're going to be at the 9th fret, which should set off alarms, and reaching back. So it's going to go 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12. So at this point, I think you're pretty comfortable with what we're doing. This thing in parentheses is where we start, and that answers the question, what finger am I going to use for this note? Circled notes, we deviate. And then, so fingering 6 features more pinky reaches, like we did in fingering 3. So here this might sound a little weird because we're starting on the 2nd degree of the scale. So it's like we've just gone do. So that was a bunch, so it was like comfortable, pinky reach, and then the top half is super tear-upable and comfortable. And the last one, number 7, that starts at the 12th fret with E. No reaches whatsoever, just comfortably doing this. And there's your state capital, which would be the same as this C if we were in some other key. So there you are, play and point, finish as you go. You haven't done fingering 7 until you're really good at fingerings 1 through 6. Notice the ones that trip you out, go back and work on those. Initially, and make a note that this came up at 15 minutes in, where we were finished with these. First, you're going to play these sequentially, and then we're going to take the same approach we did to memorizing note names to really making each one of these fingerings an autonomous concept that you can recall, which is now, after you can play them in order, you're going to play them out of order. You can draw up a random number generator, 1 through 7, online, and whichever fingering it says, play that fingering. Again, it's key that we not only be able to think about the third fingering if we've just played 1 and 2. So now, after having relied on thinking of them in sequence, we're going to no longer be allowed to do that. If you've played 1, you're allowed to play anything but 2 next, so that when we move to other keys, you're still going to be thinking about these same hand movements and the same place you point afterwards, the same state capital, but, you know, as opposed to thinking about the circle of fifths or how many sharps or flats. So it's imperative that just each one of these 7 be an autonomous concept in your head. And the way we're going to deal with that is randomizing the order that we play them in. What I mean is your random number generator says 3. You play the third leg without having to do 1 and 2 first. Then it says 7, you do 7. Then it says 1, so that's the idea, is that having done them in sequence and relied on thinking about them sequentially, now we're going to randomize so that each one just becomes this thing that goes, I know a hand movement, that I point to here after I play it, or I point to here after it. So just try not to overthink this. Right now we're just learning the vocabulary and alphabet for this language we're going to speak. In this thing, we're just doing the most efficient positional 4-finger movement, but it's no less number 1 to do this than... So in the long run, it's just you and the dots. You'll play like a guitarist and do lots of nuanced things. This is just the most efficient way to play single notes, which is just our starting point. So there you go. Go forth and multiply your knowledge of stuff, understanding that the next step to this is that once you realize you can play and point everywhere, I'm going to show you how to instantly apply this in every other key. And it's not just going to go, look, you can move this one too. We're going to have a way where I just show you the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain and everything. We'll get to that point where you just look down at the fretboard and can just go, I want to play an A and C, 4, 5, 6. So there it is. Great. Glad I had the impetus to make this video. I will see you next week.